Picking up where I left off last time, I just want to game this out a little bit. Try to have fun with it, but also like try to make a little sense in an offbeat way. Because I've decided to go with weirdo. Like, who am I? What am I? Right? I'm interested in politics. I'm interested in religion. I'm interested in philosophy. I'm interested in mathematics. I'm interested in commerce. I'm interested in art. I'm interested in literature. I'm interested in poetry. I'm interested in classical music. I'm interested in trap. I'm interested in UK grime. Right? I'm interested in specifically thrash death metal. If I'm a metalhead at all, I'm a thrash. I lean toward thrash death metal, and I cringe at black metal for the most part. Though there are those crossovers, and there are those crossovers between quote-unquote cringe metal and cringe classical music. Is it King Diamond? Or there's that opera singer black metal guy who is at least 20 years ago mostly probably associated with like Satanism, but I'm not so sure. You know? If we were to meet Job, J-O-B, get a job, get Job, get faith, faith job, job, have faith in your job. And the only guy who had it worse than Job was Jesus, one might say. But did David have it any better? Well, did Isaac have it any better? Did Ishmael have it any better? Did Bathsheba have it any better? Wait, no. Did Hatshepsut have it any better? Did Mary Totten have it any better? Did Nefertiti have it any better? Did Cleopatra have it any better? No. People still put Cleopatra on a pedestal. And in some ways, it's funny. You got Nefertiti. And if you look at Nefertiti's name as it's written in hieroglyphs, it's one of the most beautiful, symbolic, written statements of a name that has ever existed. It's primarily this one symbol of this like oval cartouche. It's a shape that's like an oval, like an ellipse, like a cartouche, like a dung beetle, like an opal, with a little cross on the top, you know, what, 1300, 1800, whatever years before the Christos. And it's just cross after 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 cross, which is a symbolic the three greatest things in ancient Egypt. Wipe the slate clean, let me tell you. And this isn't anti-patriarchy. That's not what this is. This is well, I'll leave you hanging in suspense about what this exactly is, but we need simply to refocus. If we want to understand Egypt, the focal point, to begin with, not to end with, but where we're going to begin, is with the 18th dynasty. And we are going to look at Hatshepsut, Nefertiti, and Mary Totten. Who, in lost texts. There are lost texts written in many, many languages, which have yet to be found, which may never be found, but they may. You know, if they're found, this video will be historic for thousands of years. If they're not found, well, at least you saw it, and you can judge for yourself. You can do your own research. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. But what I'm saying, from my standpoint, from my perspective in history, and in my perspective of a very, very slight propensity for submersion in atemporality, prophecy. Not necessarily a gift for prophecy, but at the very least, right? I won't be so bold to say I'm a prophet. I won't be so bold to say I have a gift for prophecy. But I will emphatically proclaim that despite my idiocy, and when we consider the term of idiot, we must consider two things. First, that Steve Martin movie, The Jerk. Second, the loosely Greco-Roman idea of the idiot or the fool of later times, or the court jester, the court jester of kingly courts. The sovereign comedian today. Now, to be a comedian in the past, you were the one person, right? To be the court jester to the king back in the day meant that you had to win the favor of the king to be the funny guy, to be the levity, the leaven, the light, the air, the breath, the rising. What people don't realize, read the book Infinitesimal by Amir Alexander, A-M-I-R Alexander. Infinitesimal. I forget the subtitle. It is one of the best books on history, philosophy, the philosophy of science, the philosophy of mathematics, the history and philosophy of science, of astronomy, of astrology. It's called Infinitesimal, and I'm not even sure, I can't remember. Maybe that, like, I thought the whole book would be about Leibniz and Newton. The book might mention Leibniz and Newton once. It's the biggest name drop book since Aristotle. People shit on name dropping, right? Aristotle, right? Fundamental. Aristotle was the biggest name dropper in history. So if we're shitting on name dropping, we're shitting on Aristotle. Aristotle is Patrick Henry. Is it Patrick Henry? John Henry? Right. Like, Aristotle is the strongest link. Like, Aristotle is the unbreakable chain. Even though he's not perfect, even though he's wrong about things, he's less wrong historically about things. Plato's the weakest. Plato's the sophist. And then people talk about Neoplatonists. That's the big thing these days. People think. The scuttlebutt, the word on the street, is that panpsychism is on the rise, philosophically. Well, kind of, sort of. The good thing about that is that, right, like, so panpsychism it's a dead issue because it's still tied to background independence rather than background dependence. So it's incorrect. However, the good thing about the draw of panpsychism or pantheism or anyway, is that at the very least it is extra empiricist. And the funny thing that's happening these days is that desperate empiricists are grasping toward panpsychism. And desperate panpsychists are grasping toward empiricism. And while that's happening, rational, theological spiritualism is codifying into a new sun to shine a new light on the new heaven and the new earth. The Old and New Testament, the good book, it's 2/3 of the story. Hitler was simply a false messiah. Everything he said wrong. But he said one thing right, which gave him power. He told one truth. How did he become so powerful? Because he told one truth. Everything else he said was a lie. But he told one truth. That there will be, and I'm not even translating, I'm not only reinterpreting, he called it a Third Reich. What I'm saying is from prophets. A third book is being written, and with it a third apocrypha. What the mistake theologians make is pitting canon against apocrypha, against various forms of Protestantism, against various forms of non-Christian religions, practices, habits, spiritualisms. The truth shall not be written here alone. Leprechauns. Leprechauns and archangels. God. Aliens. Leprechauns and archangels. They're actually closer to reason. One of my favorite videos about aliens that I don't see anymore, and I should say that 20 years ago, see, this is the thing people don't realize. People think because there's so much information on the internet, we're like, oh, there's so much information, but 20 years ago, there was more information. So now Congress and the Senate are talking about aliens. 20, 25 years ago, the only thing on the internet about aliens and UFOs was pumpkin seed UFOs. It was everywhere. Now it's totally clean. There were like thousands of hours of straight up VHS video, analog shit. Before AI, before like Photoshop and like Midjourney or whatever, before everything was so like where you could bang shit out no problem. Of fake shit. Like there were all these old school videos from like the 80s, 90s, zeros, tens, or whatever of pumpkin seed UFOs. Flight of the Navigator. Flight of the fucking Navigator shit. Like, but like way better. They were everywhere. Back before YouTube was YouTube, back when when YouTube first came around, it was like short 6-minute videos. And it was Google Video that had the long videos. They were all free. There were no commercials. There were no like big, huge fucking channels. It was a lot of Alex Jones and a lot of pumpkin seed UFOs, which aren't on the internet anywhere now. Even if you search pumpkin seed UFOs, maybe on 4chan. Well, besides that, fuck it. Anyway, this is a prototype. Yeah, my prototype. Aliens, leprechauns. Leprechauns, aliens, oh, of course, Bigfoot. But there are logical explanations for these things, if we think about it. There are little people. Like, if you look at chipmunks, and if you look at gophers, if you look at squirrels, if you look at red squirrels, if you look at gray squirrels, if you look at groundhogs, if you look at gophers, if you look at chipmunks, and you really watch them, they're different forms of the same thing. They have different, they live by different rules. Their ancestors made different decisions, yet they're all the same, and yet they could come to an agreement. What would it take? What social engineering? Like, if you're an engineer, or if you're a social engineer, could you create a peaceful chipmunk town? Wouldn't that be an interesting experiment? Like if you're a social engineer, a civil engineer, a social engineer, a civil social engineer. Chipmunks are brutal, man. They're killers. So you'd have to understand about psychology. You'd have to understand about biology. You'd have to understand about evolution. And you'd have to understand about civil engineering, structures, distribution of resources, water, food, shelter, to chipmunks. Imagine if you could construct a peaceful 3,000 chipmunk town in your spare time, just as a hobby, in your backyard. The same way people these days build robotics or this or that, you could actually build a town for 3,000 chipmunks peacefully if you were smart enough in civil engineering and social engineering, and probably also in the backgrounds of moral philosophy and redemptive theology. Yes. I'm tempted to say, well, why not? But actually, it's even bigger than why not. It's just simply, yes, obviously. All right, I just want to get this party started. I just want to get this candle lit. It's just a prototype of like a cement thing I want to make. Cement and plaster. I'm a ways away from carving stone.